Hi, I'm Adam with Cool Media Sports and Retro, and this is a new segment called Retro Replay. I've mentioned that I'm the definition of the old school gamer. When I hear people referring to those who started gaming with the original Halo as old school, I can't help but laugh. I've been gaming long before Bungie even existed. Hell, I was gaming before Microsoft even put out DOS. I've wanted this channel to be primarily retro-focused, so it makes sense for me to do full retrospectives of various game series, preferably dead ones, so I don't have to worry about updating them in the future. Since this weekend is my birthday, I'm kicking off the series with classic Atari. I got my start in gaming back in the early 80s with the good old Atari 2600. My mom had it, but I think I played it more than she did. Unfortunately, the company that created this classic piece of hardware doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, I know that Atari is still around, but not really. After the failure of the Jaguar, aside from some cool stuff like the Test Drive series, Atari's largely been trying to bank on nostalgia from old school gamers rather than creating new things. The fact that they're celebrating their anniversary by hawking those worthless NFTs is legitimately sad. Well, rather than mourn what Atari had become, I got myself an early birthday gift. Thanks to a sale on PS4, I got the entire Atari Flashback Classics trilogy. Now, what better way to celebrate my birthday than with a marathon? Today I'm jumping into Volume 1 of this collection. Expect videos for the other 2 volumes in the coming months. There are 50 games in this volume alone. Some are arcade games, some are 2600 titles, and some are previously unreleased prototypes, and I'm quickly going to go through all of them, one by one. Before I start, I do need to address a couple of issues with the collection itself. First, for the sake of recording, I turned off the scan lines and filters which were designed to make the graphics look as they did on old CRTs. That may seem disingenuous to the games, but it was more important that you all could clearly see what I'm doing. Also, there are controller issues with certain games. While the games that originally used joysticks came to this collection unblemished, the games that used arcade dials, the paddles, or a trackball just don't work as well. There are plenty of adjustments for sensitivity on the PS4 controllers, but it just isn't the same as using the original paddles. I know I could win Pong consistently if I was on the original hardware. Well, enough stalling. It's time to blast through this collection. Black Widow. This is a twin-stick shooter about shooting giant bugs. The colorful vector graphics are appealing, and there's a wide variety of bugs to blast. There are even bonus stages very similar to Galaga. Great stuff. Centipede. Probably Atari's most famous original game. The goal is to wipe out each of the centipedes a segment at a time with a bunch of mushrooms and other bugs in the way. The controls are too slippery without a proper trackball, and the formula was much improved later on, as you'll see. You can still have fun with it, though. Atari Force Liberator. This is basically 3D Missile Command. While the visuals were quite advanced for the time, the many directions the enemy missiles were coming from made the game more annoying than fun. Just stick with Missile Command. Lunar Lander. This is a very technical game about landing a lunar module. You can score massive point bonuses for landing on certain exact spots, but you'll most likely just crash over and over again. While I applaud the detail in this one, it was way more frustrating than fun. Millipede. Remember when I said the Centipede's formula was improved later? Here you go. The game plays faster, there are explosives that can wipe out a whole millipede in a second, and the array of other pests to shoot just gets crazy. Why isn't this one getting remade as much as Centipede? Pong. The one that started it all. While Pong's historical significance cannot be overstated, playing it now is rather dull. There are no frills to this one. It is what it is. There's a reason why the first-gen Pong consoles of the 70s put additional games on their machines. Space Duel. This is basically a more colorful version of Asteroids. The thrust, shield, and shooting controls are just as you remember them, and the variety of things to blast keeps you on your toes. Some of the extras, like tracking shots, can get rather annoying, but this is still a fun follow-up. Tempest. This shooter is probably the best use of vector graphics ever. While the 3D effect is simple, it still looks great even now, and the shooting reminds me pleasantly of Gyrus. Out of all the Atari classics, this one deserved the later remakes the most, all of which are great too. Warlords. It's 4-player competitive breakout. You can catch the shot with good timing, but the timing has to be really fucking good. I stress that this is 4-player because you don't want to face the computer. The opponents will break down your walls like they were the Kool-Aid Man. If you don't have friends to join in, don't bother. 3D Tic-Tac-Toe. I reviewed this one on the Defunct Games website years ago. It's crap. The view sucks, there's no flare at all, and the computer either lags or cheats. Easy skip. Air-Sea Battle. You know those turret sections that keep getting snuck into first-person shooters? This game is nothing but that. Fortunately, there's a wide variety of modes including bombing runs, and I found myself having plenty of fun with the simplicity. This is what I want from old Atari games. Backgammon. What can I say? It replicates the classic game well enough, even including the doubling cube. The computer does put up a good fight. This'll do. Basketball. 2600 sports games have not aged well, as you'll soon see, but this one was okay. While moving into steel may be a bit awkward, this is a simple game of one-on-one that can still be fun as long as you don't mind having a player that's purple. Blackjack. How could the Atari 2600 fuck up Blackjack? How about requiring the paddles unnecessarily? How about not having pushes for tying the dealer? You just lose in that case. Atari absolutely blew it with this one. Bowling. While bowling is fine just about any way you play it, the 2600 version has an option for a steerable bowling ball. You heard me right, a steerable bowling ball. Scoring turkeys has never been this easy. Canyon Bomber. This one tries to do what Air-Sea Battle did, but dropping bombs in a hole just isn't as exhilarating. There are modes for bombing runs here too, but it's just a lesser version of what the other game had. Centipede. The 2600 version of Centipede plays better than its arcade cousin thanks to the joystick support. Other than that, the game is a very faithful adaptation. Millipede is still better, but this one is still fun. Circus Atari. This is Breakout as programmed by a sadist. While bouncing on the teeter-totter to pop balloons is the whole point of the game, I can't help but giggle when an acrobat misses and flattens his head. I still have a great time with this one. Combat. The original 2600 pack-in title. There are lots of modes with both tanks and planes, but there are issues. The tank maps and modes, including bouncing shots, are varied, but the game moves too slowly. The planes play faster, but the modes there are dull. Add in the fact that it's 2 players only, and this classic battler gets a skip now. Combat 2. This was an unreleased prototype meant to follow up Combat. While the ability of the players to customize obstacles is a neat addition, the game saw its modes cut by a whopping 90%. If you want more combat, this'll do. As for me... Desert Falcon. This is Atari trying to do an isometric shooter to compete with Zaxxon. They might have succeeded if I was able to clearly see what was killing me. While I applaud the ambition with this one, it just kept annoying me. Dodge 'em. So, what do you get when you combine Pac-Man with a demolition derby? Judging from this game, you clearly get a piece of shit. I'm normally very forgiving of 2600 games, but this one just sucks. Fatal Run. I have a fondness for the old game Road Blasters, and Fatal Run is a pretty good demake of that concept. While it may be a pain in the ass trying to pass enemy cars since they linger at the bottom of the screen long enough to ram you, I was impressed with how good the driving and shooting felt. It's also one of the best looking 2600 games out there. Football. Even though I should be charitable since this game of Pigskin was a 2600 launch title, I can't. While choosing plays is easy, the on-field action sucks. The lack of a one-player mode is inexcusable. Home run. This is a pathetic take on baseball. No fielders? Are you serious? Human cannonball. This is another very technical game like Lunar Lander. While it is easier to launch your human cannonball into the bucket than trying to land a lunar module, the game is still rather lame. However, like with Circus Atari, I got some sadistic giggles whenever the guy crashed into a wall. What the hell? Check it out if you're sick enough. Millipede. All the advancements of the arcade version without dealing with a trackball? Yes, please. This is the best playing version of this format from back in the day. Again, why is Atari so hell-bent on remaking Centipede over and over instead of Millipede? Miniature golf. I covered this as part of the Defunct Games Golf Club years ago. It's still incredibly lame. It's still better than golf on 2600, but that's not saying much. Pong Sports. Now, if you want to play Pong, this is the way to do it. There are bonus modes and options at the yin-yang. Unfortunately, most of the coolest modes require at least 2 players, but it's still awesome to see them. Quad Run. This shooter, I think it is just crap. You actually have to bounce back and forth to recollect your shots, or you lose them. What moron thought that up? It's also way too obtuse. I actually had to read the instructions to know what the hell I was supposed to be doing. E.T. was easier to figure out. Yeah, I went there. Radar Lock. Atari trying to do Afterburner actually turned out pretty well. It did take a few crashes before I figured out how to do the refueling, but otherwise the flying and shooting handled great. I love Dogfighters. I actually have all the Ace Combat games. This one is worth a takeoff. Real Sports Boxing. While it can't top Punch-Out, this was an ambitious game for the time. 4 characters to choose from, and plenty of action. It can be easy to machine gun body blows to knock out the computer in the second round, but it's still a blast. Real Sports Football. While it certainly looks better than the earlier football game, it doesn't play much better. The controls are a mess. I kept punting accidentally when I wanted to pass. Well, I'm passing now. Real Sports Soccer. Tackles are a pain to pull off, passing to teammates is worse, and the computer is somehow always faster than you. Soccer is supposed to be one of the easiest sports to turn into a video game, but Atari didn't do it that time. Real Sports Volleyball. Coordinating 2 matching players at once can be a bit weird, but I got the hang of it quickly enough. This is a well-playing game of beach volleyball, worth a look if you don't mind the lack of the dead or alive girls in skimpy bikinis. Save Mary. This action puzzle game is kinda like Lemmings. Dropping blocks to save a woman from drowning is a neat idea, but the execution is botched. Grabbing the blocks is problematic, and it's way too easy to squash the woman you're trying to save. No thanks. Slot Machine. Listen, developers. Slot machines are not worth playing without real money on the line. While this 2600 game tried to put a competitive element in there, it's not enough to keep this from being a total waste of time. Slot Racers. I raced slot cars when I was a kid, but this did not give me the nostalgic fuzzy feelings. There are plenty of mazes and modes, even allowing players to shoot each other like a precursor to Twisted Metal, but the control's a pain, and the matches take forever to finish. Sprint Master. An isometric racer like Super Sprint was a neat idea for the 2600. It has 9 tracks that all look impressive by 2600 standards. However, the controls are garbage, and the computer is impossible to beat. Just stick to RC Pro-Am. Star Raiders. This was one of the most advanced games the 2600 ever saw. Going beyond just flying around blasting spaceships, you have to manage shields and fuel and defend your home base. It's a complicated game, but very exhilarating. Steeplechase. You'd think a game about jumping horses would be simple to pick up. You'd be mistaken. It's almost impossible to gauge what you're actually doing. In fact, it felt as if the game largely played itself. If the game doesn't need me, I'll just be going. Stunt Cycle. This game promises that you will feel like Evel Knievel. Nope. Even after numerous tries, I never could figure out how to avoid crashing, let alone scoring. Something like this should not require instructions. Hell, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was easier to figure out than this. Super Baseball. Hey, Atari figured out how to put fielders on the field. That automatically makes this game better than Home Run, but it still isn't good. Batting control is a pain, and the computer is always in the perfect position to get me out. I'll stick to the show. Super Football. Well, it took 3 tries, but Atari finally got football right. The behind-the-player's viewpoint was cool to see in an Atari game, and the controls are finally the way I want them. This is the oldest football game I can think of that's still worth playing. Swordquest Earthworld. It's almost pointless to play the Swordquest games now since the famous golden prizes are long gone. Taken on its own, the first has a couple neat ideas with the items, and the 2 few minigames are enjoyable. There's a lot of trial and error required with the item drops to get the clues needed to finish. I guess there are worse adventure games on the system. Swordquest Fireworld. Apparently adding more minigames for the second Swordquest game meant a lot of copying and pasting. Every room has a minigame, and the quality is uneven. The Kaboom variants are annoying, while the Falcon shooters were fun. My opinion was very meh. Swordquest Waterworld. The third Swordquest game was straight up annoying. The minigames all revolved around hopping ice floes and dodging marine life. It got old fast. It's hard to imagine how crappy Air World would have been if it had gotten finished before the video game crash. Tempest. This unreleased prototype naturally doesn't come close to the visual splendor of the arcade original, but the gameplay is largely intact. I did miss not having the Super Zapper, but I can forgive that since the game wasn't finished. I was having fun, so I'll be charitable. Warlords. The 2600 version is much easier to play than the arcade original, and it has some neat variations added in. The computer is also not as vicious as in the arcade version. The visuals may be poorer, but the gameplay is superior. Yar's Revenge. Now this is the shit right here. The tension is palpable when you need to eat away at the enemy barrier, knowing it can fire a spiral at any time. Meanwhile, timing perfectly to nail a spiral with your cannon in mid-flight is so satisfying. This is still one of the best games on the 2600. So it was almost a dead heat between the plays and the passes. Volume 1 was very uneven. For every legitimate gem like Tempest or Yar's Revenge, there was a justly forgotten piece of crap like Dodge'em and 3D Tic-Tac-Toe. Of course, this is always what tends to happen with these kinds of compilations. Let's hope the balance sways more to the play side with the other 2 volumes. So this was the first installment of Retro Replay. Like what I'm doing? Give a like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any suggestions for other series that deserve a full retrospective, drop them in the comments below or submit in my Twitter. Handle's right there. Next time I'm starting the 9th tour of Outlaw Golf 2. Take care and game on.